Awesome. Thanks, Emily. So thank you all for being here with us this evening to talk about clean water and advocacy. Collect, count, and advocate, really showing you guys how to amplify your stewardship by tracking litter data to empower real solutions. So I see a lot of familiar faces here on our screen, but to introduce myself again, my name is Brittany Anderson. I am the current volunteer coordinator here at Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. This is my first time presenting this webinar with our community engagement manager, Emily Diet, who is really awesome. But I'm excited to really share this information with you guys and have you all be empowered and impacted to make real solutions. So here we go. So our agenda for today, I'm going to briefly talk about Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, our organization, our overview, who we are and what we do. We will then go into why is collecting data and citizen science important? Like, what's the importance of collecting all this data that we're talking about? How you can count it with CleanSwell will be our next topic in the lineup. And then lastly, we'll talk about some policy spotlights and how you can advocate for clean water. All right, so who are we? So Buffalo Niagara Waterkeepers mission, we protect clean water, we restore the health of ecosystems, we connect people to the water, and we inspire economic growth and community engagement for current and future generations to come. And we do that in several different ways through our cleanup efforts, through our restoration projects, through our sampling. So we do all of this in a lot of different areas to really hone in our water protection and advocacy. So where do we work? We work within the Niagara River watershed. And a watershed is pretty much just an area of land that drains into a river or a lake or other water bodies. So there are several sub watersheds where you can see here, we primarily work in the Niagara River watershed. A lot of times we like to think of a watershed as a tub where if the water flows into a bathtub, it usually flows towards the drain. And if water escapes the bathtub, the water will flow elsewhere. The bathtub is our watershed, if you want to think about it as an image, and the drain is the receiving waterway. So we work in the Niagara River watershed. Again, our water comes from snow melt, surface runoff, groundwater. All of this flows into one central tributary, like I had talked about previously. To go back into a little bit more about our watersheds, we are located along the westernmost portion of the states. So up here in the Niagara River watershed, it's part of the larger Great Lakes drainage basin, and it also encompasses over 900,000 acres of land and over 71 municipalities and over 3,000 miles of water courses. So that's a lot within our Niagara River watershed. So we do a lot of work to protect our watershed. So now I'm going to kick it off to Emily to kind of talk about cleanups from last year, 2023 cleanups.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Yeah, so diving right into a little bit more about our cleanups program, why we collect data and why it's so important in really protecting our entire watershed. And something we like to say is no matter where you're cleaning up in the Niagara River watershed, you're protecting our water, right? So even if you can't see Lake Erie, you can't see Skagakwood Creek, or you're not on a shoreline, the work you do to remove debris is ultimately protecting our water, right? Because just like Brittany said, when it rains, when it snows, that water moves, right? And it collects debris, trash, plastics mostly, right? Into our drinking water resources. So this slide really is just highlighting all the data that we collected last year in 2023. So many of you are familiar because you're captains for our spring sweep. We'll talk a little bit more later about our solo sweeps. But really, we've made data collection an integral part of our work with volunteers when they're out there to increase their impact. And last year, with the use of Clean Swell, which is an app created by Ocean Conservancy that Brittany will talk all about, we're able to really quantify what are the top items that we're collecting. That's just one of many ways that we can analyze the litter data we collect. But this was our top 5, and not too surprising, being that plastics really makes up pretty much all of these items, right? So foam pieces, thinking about those little tiny ones, which we recently passed a ban on polystyrofoam. So I was actually surprised to see a lot of this, but we find it in a lot of other industries, not just in food packaging, which is where the ban was primarily focused on. Cigarette butts, that's really always been in the top 5, if not #1 item that we collect. Many folks don't always know that cigarette filters are made of plastic, right? So that's a type of single-use plastic. Um, of course, food wrappers, we all see those if we're out there doing cleanups. Plastic bottle caps, that's huge. I feel like something after learning how long that thick, hard plastic lasts in our environment, I think that's one area we definitely need to consider when we're thinking about actions, advocacy, and policy to address really harmful, long-lasting plastics. And then #5 is really kind of a little more nebulous because there's different categories that we'll look at later in Clean Swell. But can we pop to the next slide? Yeah, so continuing telling that data story. So that was last year. And this image really just gives you a snapshot of our cleanups for the last several years. And really what this picture is trying to paint is that um, and you'll see some of the years like in 2018 and 19, those numbers were really, really high. And that wasn't necessarily that there was an extremely more amount of trash, although we know 2020 there probably was a lot less, but it was also the number of volunteers. So we have anywhere from, 1,200 volunteers to 2018, we had over 2,000. It was a huge year. We were celebrating the Clean Water Act, or I'm sorry, I think it was Earth Day, excuse me. And so we had a ton of volunteers in many, many sites. And then obviously 2020 was a little bit of an outlier here with an incredibly low number because we didn't gather at all. But essentially what this story is saying to me and us at Waterkeeper is that we continue to collect the same amount of trash year after year after year. And so we need to do something different. So if you go to the next slide, this really was just a poll I did. I've done it the last couple of years, just saying, having you guys dream big. What's the type of waste that you see in your litter pickups, or even just in your neighborhoods that you want to see eliminated? And I ask this question because I think it's really important that although plastic is so ubiquitous in our environment, and it seems really everywhere, there are so many things that would be, kind of that low hanging fruit to start with, right? The things that are single use, I think we've all realized how harmful they are, which I see a lot of those in this. I personally like everything. But really just to remind us that if you think that there's something that should be eliminated, chances are you're not the only one, and there's probably actions being taken to address it. So the next slide, really just kind of honing in on why we are kind of in the situation that we're in, right? Plastic production really since the 60s has not really been addressed as a huge waste issue until more recently, right? And 90% of the plastic hasn't even been recycled, that has been in all of the plastic that has been created, right? Because in the grand scheme of things, it is a newer type of product in this modern era, right? And something else I wanted to also highlight is that, our plastic or I'm sorry, our recycling system here in the US and really around the world is quite broken. Um, a lot of the plastic that we think is getting recycled when we put it in that bin does not get recycled. I Our friends at Beyond Plastics, they've come out with couple really great studies, one of which you'll see the link at the bottom there. And that really just made that big connection to plastic pollution and the climate crisis. Something that we don't always put together when we're thinking about the plastic issue that we have, but plastic is fossil fuels, right? That is how it is created. And so it's really important to make those connections when we're in a time that we know climate change is here and we need to take action on it. And then lastly, plastics is not just choking up our ecosystems and harming wildlife and disturbing habitat, but it's also starting to be identified for their human health impacts. So, plastics is in our bodies. Plastics has been found in the human heart. It is time to really turn the tap off and say we don't want this not only in our environment, but we don't want it to in our bodies. It's been shown to cause health issues, everything from autoimmune to different cancers of the liver and the kidneys. So something we really need to take action on. And the next slide is something I think is so important when we talk about any environmental issue where we want to see justice. And thinking about when we think about climate justice, it's really important to think about social justice at the same time. And I really love this image because it paints that picture. I know there's always conversations about how we can be a better socially just society, right? Because there's so much inequality. And this image really is showing, well, it's not just about making everything equal, right? It's not just equality. We have to consider equity and justice. So thinking about if something is unequal, right, that doesn't mean just trying to make it equal is going to fix the problem, right? We need to not only provide resources in order to make things more balanced and just and equitable, but also provide those opportunities. And when I define climate justice, I really consider that intersectionality between the environment, racial justice, social inequalities, with really the goal that everyone has a right to clean water, air, and soil. Um, so the next slide, again, is just kind of honing in on climate justice as it relates to the plastic crisis and thinking about, a broad here in the US, excuse me, we, produce a ton of plastic. And previously we used to ship all of that to China until a few years ago, China said we're actually not going to be accepting this plastic anymore because it wasn't really getting recycled. And so pretty much that just shifted where we were sending it to countries that had even less environmental protection. So when we're thinking abroad, that's some of the issues related to plastic waste. And then here at home, you'll find that a lot of the plastic production plants are found in low-income communities, Black and Brown communities. And so it's really having a disproportionate impact in the same way when we talk about climate change and the disproportionate impacts of climate change, again, very much connected to our plastic issue around the world. That last thing is really just about a brand audit. I always like to highlight that as well. A group does an annual brand audit in over 40 countries around the world. And so those are some of the top polluters on the planet listed at the bottom there. And I'm excited because here at home and the work that our volunteers have done, if you go to the next slide, actually thinking about a branded litter data collection project right here at home with some of you right here on this call and many of our other Waterkeeper volunteers were able to contribute to a lawsuit filed by the Attorney General's office here in New York State against one of those largest polluters in the planet, and that's PepsiCo. And I'm just so proud of not only our team at Waterkeeper, but our dedicated site captains and all the volunteers that show up at our sweeps, who do solo sweeps, have really contributed to making the litter the litter database that we have here in our region so strong, that we're actually able to hold polluters accountable. So to me, that is the most exciting part of tonight, is to really announce that to you, and hopefully you can share that message with others and help us count it with clean swell. So I'm going to hand it over to Brittany to talk about how you can do that and contribute to this awesome work.
Thanks, Emily. So counting it with CleanSwell, to all of our returners, I hope you already have this app downloaded and have used it several times along your site captaining or just volunteering for a spring sweep. But for our newcomers, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how you can use the CleanSwell app during and after your cleanups. Talk a little about what Tides is, and how this app really supports clean water advocacy. So the app, the first thing you want to do, this is available on iPhone and any Android device, is download the app and make an account. That is the first step that you will do. Once you have your account, it will take you to this first page here, which is really kind of cool. They have 3 different options. Mainly we'll be starting using the middle option, which is to start a new cleanup here. And the last one is to record a past cleanup. There is a tab here that says trash collection devices. We don't have that in this area here, but it is something that is coming soon on the app, which will allow trash collection devices to also count litter data that they're collecting. But for us, we'll be starting here in the start a new cleanup. If you are ever able to do a cleanup and forgot the app or wasn't able to record it, you can also record a past cleanup, which will allow you to then count bag weight. So if you had a small bag of trash that you collected, a medium-sized bag, or a large-sized bag, you can still go back and record that data via weight, separate from what I'm going to talk about when you click the start cleanup. So when you start the cleanup, you will see our wonderful logo here, which lets you know that you are in the Great Lakes area, which is awesome. And then it will have you put in the number of people. So you can obviously go out on your own, you'll put 1, or you could do this with a small group. However many you have with your cleanup, you can just put that number there. And then we have the group name here. On the app, it will say that it is optional, but for our tracking purposes, please put in your group name. And the way that we will identify this on the back end when I talk about Tides is if you put B&W, which stands for Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, in the location that you are doing your cleanup. In this example, we are at Gretwick Park, but wherever location you are at, just put that. It can be, MLK Park, it can be whatever street you're on if you're doing it in your neighborhood. So just put B&W and whatever location that you are. Underneath here, it has cleanup type. Majority of the time you will be doing a land cleanup, but there are other options where it is on the water cleanup, underwater cleanup. Hopefully, if you do have a boat, you could do it on the water cleanup, or if you're scuba diving somewhere and just happen to be underwater. But majority of the time you will be using the land cleanup option. And then this location is automatically populated by your gypsy point. So you don't need to update that. Once you have all of that information loaded into that first screen, you will click Start a New Cleanup again. So then it will take you to this lovely screen, which has a breakdown of literally all of the common litter items that you may have, from beverage cans to bottles to bottle caps to cups and plates, which is really awesome. It has this in this very neat, organized format. And this is just the most common. There's also other sections, such as fishing and boating. If you're down by the harbor, there might be fishing line and other fishing equipment. illegal dumping. I know a lot of our areas have tires, and even if you get down towards Skajackwada Mouth areas and around Skajackwada Creek, there actually are like actual whole grocery carts that are being dumped into our waterways. So that's illegal dumping. Personal hygiene, packing materials, other items, which is, you can put that if you don't have a specific option. And then tiny trash, which is under 2.5 centimeters or microplastics. So there's a wide range of areas where you can track your data. You can either tap it once and it will count your items individually, or you can hold it down, which is identified by the circle here. You can press it, hold it for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, then it will take you to the screen here, and it will ask you how many items would you like to add. If you found 30 bottle caps and don't want to press it individually 30 times, you could just hold it down, type in 30 and then update amount, and it will then show 30 here in your on your main page, which is really kind of awesome. It gives you ample ability to really take accurate accounts of what you're finding. It also will total the number of items that you have here at the top, the total weight here, how long you've been cleaning up. So we'll track that amount. And then the distance. If you're walking um, several miles or, just walking around, it will also track how far you went, which is really kind of cool. So all of that data is collected on this one app, which is really awesome. Next thing is the last thing after you're done with your cleanup, you've collected all of the trash in your area. The most important thing you want to do is finish this cleanup. Unless you click finish this cleanup, it will save your data item, but it won't get uploaded into the larger database Tides, which I will talk about a little bit later. So make sure that when you're done with your cleanup, you do click finish this cleanup. Another option here underneath here is if you do have the option to take photos. So if you find something really horrid or something really cool, you can take pictures, and that data will also be uploaded as well. So very nice, easy, friendly, simple, and user-friendly app, which is awesome. And so once again, you want to just make sure that you have the B&W Gratwick Park or B&W MLK Park, wherever location that you are, make sure that the B&W in your location is listed, because then we are able to go back on Tides and see all the information that you guys put in. This screenshot here is what I was mentioning earlier about recording a past cleanup. It will allow you to have to pick from small bag, which is 2 pounds or 1 kilogram, a medium bag, and a large bag. And you would do it the same way. If you found 2 small bags, 5 medium bags, 1 large bag, you're able to put that information in to record a past cleanup as well. So once all that is done, you click finish cleanup. It then gets inserted into Tides, which is the trash information and data for education and solution, which is the largest litter database in the world. So it is international. You can have access to this. It is publicly accessible. All that you will need to do is just sign up for an account. And here you are able to really just kind of click into these little numbers here. You can even make a polygon for a certain area if you're looking for, kind of zoom in and see what kind of trash is being collected around the world, which is really awesome. On our end, we can even get even more specific by downloading an Excel report. And this is where that group name is really important, because when we identify like who has been contributing, who has done our annual spring sweep, who has been doing solo sweeps, we are able to go in and say, oh, this person, B&W, Broadway, excuse me, Freedom Park, that we know that they have done a cleanup on our end. So we're able to see all this information on the back end of Tides, which is really awesome and a wonderful way to just to see what data is being collected, so, which is publicly accessible.
Brittany, real quick on that data collection, when we're doing solo cleanups, so it would be a good idea to do BNW and our spot. When we do the
Absolutely.
solely, okay, all right.
Hmm. Yes, please do, because then we can track all of that information. Because that way we know if we see it's on June 25th, we know that this person actually did a solo sweep because it's not on April 20th when we held our annual spring sweep. So it kind of like we can get a breakdown of dates when it happened. So all of that information is very useful if you could put BNW in your location. Awesome. So again, all of this data really is helping us in our policy and advocacy efforts. So I'm going to swing it back over to Emily to just talk about some policies that have been affected by litter data.
If I could ask one
Thanks
more
so much,
question before
Brittany.
you leave that place, or do you want me to
Sure.
save it for the end?
We are gonna have time for questions at the end for sure.
Okay, and we'll go with that. I'll wait to the end.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. So we just have a few more slides left. We're gonna talk a little bit about policy right now, and really just trying to remind you that this litter data doesn't just sit there, right? We have also the awesome OHE case, but really these are some past policies that have already gone through here in New York State. So first with the smoking ban. In New York State, basically there's municipal laws kind of popping up all over the state and really the country. But as I mentioned before, they're the number one thing we pick up at cleanup. So having it may be tedious to count those cigarette butts and clean swell, but I will tell you it's really impactful. And we have some friends and we participate in it, a collaborative called Kick Butts Collaborative, and they really rely on that cigarette butt data from Tides, which by the way, Cheryl, you asked about that group name, which is so important, because really on the back end, we will then download basically an Excel sheet. And so that's why it's so nice to have everyone put their put BNW so that it's easily trackable. But we do get specific GPS points in there when you're using the app. So keeping that in mind as well. There's a couple other ones that I put on here. Probably many of you have heard of the microbead ban in certain products. That was to me one of the first really bans that came out addressing any type of plastic pollution that I recall. I'm sure there's been others, but it's very memorable to me because it started in here in New York State and some really incredible local advocates. And then it was actually passed for the entire United States. So that's really exciting. And then of course the plastic bag ban and the polystyrene ban here in New York State. So we have definitely seen plastic bags, for instance, come out of that top 5. I showed you the top 5 in the beginning. Now we were really only collecting litter data for one cleanup in the fall as part of the international coastal cleanup. So that was really when we were seeing when we were collecting specific litter data only, but that's why it's so great we do it year round now and really can get a better snapshot of what's in our environment. The next one here really just kind of it's a lot of words, I'm not gonna lie, but really it is. Oh, this slide looks a little bit different than the one I updated most recently, but that's okay. Basically, I'm just gonna pull it up if that's okay. So break free from plastic pollution, that's a federal bill that is, these are ones that are proposed. So these have not been passed yet. I did add a few additional ones that were more recently this year for federal that were related to PFAS. That's okay that they're not on here, honestly. I know many of you have probably heard of PFAS or or polyfluoroalcohol. Oh, I'm just pronouncing it improperly, but essentially they are forever chemicals. And there's been a lot of different federal bills that have been introduced to really address PFAS. Why am I talking about PFAS? Well, they have been found in many plastics. So most popularly related to firefighter foam. used at different air bases, which we have one here in New York State. And there's actually hundreds of facilities here in our neck of the woods in the Niagara River watershed that most likely have used PFAS in the past or are continuing to. So I just wanted to really put that on your radar, and I'll drop a link in the chat to our website, which has a lot more information about PFAS if you're interested. Also in New York State, we still have the Better Bottle Bill sitting there that has been introduced a couple of years ago, and really that is to expand a bill that hasn't been updated in decades to include juice, wine, Gatorade bottles, and really increase that deposit to 10 cents, which has been proven to increase recycling rates. But we can't really talk about recycling rates, without really addressing the fact that our recycling system needs a ton of infrastructure updates here, not only in New York State, but across the country. And so we have a really bold piece of legislation out there right now called the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, which is actually really a type of EPR, because it will not only provide support to municipalities to better their recycling facilities, but also make sure that producers are reducing their amount of packaging. And there really are a plethora of different extended producer responsibility type bills. And across the country, there were dozens introduced last year in 2023 session, and in over like 14 states, and only 2 passed across the country. We did have one here, being this Packaging and Recycling Act last year, and it did not get passed, along with many in the US. And to me, that points to that we really need to put more emphasis on how important these bills are, because that's really how we're going to get to our goals. And also thinking about how we can change the system altogether, right? We have a kind of a linear system where we just produce, and it goes into our environment and landfills and our water. So really wanting to raise awareness for these EPR bills around the country and here in New York State. So again, I'll chop the PFAS one in the chat if I haven't already. Oh, I did. And Brittany, you can pop to the next slide. Actually, could you go to the next one? This was, yeah, okay. So this slide is just to talk about advocacy and reminding you that there are more ways. So we obviously are inviting you to help collect litter data with us this spring and year round in all of your cleanups. And you can use that data for other advocacy. And I think the most important thing we can all do is really understand who are our representatives. We have folks wherever you are right now. You don't just have your council member or your town board, right? We also have assembly members and Senate representatives for statewide. We have our federal representatives, right? We have our county legislators. So there's so many people making decisions for where we live, and knowing who those folks are and what they care about is really the first step, I think, to advocacy. And then of course, other ways are, if you want to really up your game, there's writing a letter or an email, or joining a group who does postcards is so impactful. And I know those efforts, when a senator, an assembly member, or a council member gets a letter saying that you're concerned about plastics and our waterways, they listen, right? It's not just when you send one letter, they don't think, oh, that's just one person, right? They think that you're become a representative of where you live. And of course, phone calls and in-person meetings are just another way to do that and express to our leaders what you care about. And then of course, volunteering, organizing, and signing or creating your own petitions are always ways to really advocate and bring those messages back to our leaders. And of course, volunteering for Waterkeeper, which I know many of you do often, so thank you. And collecting data being really just a low-hanging fruit, right, for helping support this broader clean water advocacy. Thank you. I'll hand it back to Brittany now to talk a little bit more about our specific programs of how we collect, count, and advocate.
Yeah, so Emily had just mentioned you can volunteer, right? So I'm going to just talk a little bit about our B&W programs where you can volunteer. So the first one is our River Watch. How do we collect, count, and advocate in our River Watch program? So our River Watch program is really our citizen science. Our volunteers are really the eyes on the water in this program. And really we collect water samples. So we have two different type of water samples that we do. One is um, holistically volunteer based, which is our baseline chemistry sampling. A lot of people on this call are familiar with it or are part of our baseline chemistry sampling, where we collect for pH, total dissolved solids, conductivity, oxygen levels. So all of those baseline chemistry metrics are measured to really see, get a baseline idea of what the waterway status is. Another sampling effort is all staff-based, which is we do bacteria sampling. So our staff go out in two different weather types, in wet weather and dry weather, and really go out and test the water for E. coli bacteria around those combined sewer overflows. So a combined sewer overflow is really taking the storm water combined with residential sewage and really on heavy rainfall. It unfortunately doesn't make it into the wastewater treatment plant. So all of that gets emptied out into our local waterways, which is designed that way, right? And so we go out and test in those two different time periods, dry weather and wet weather, which again is just another way for us to advocate for our clean waters. Another program in our River Watch initiative is Nodal Patrol. So a nodal is a really small plastic pellet. It's a microplastic, which is really the base production of all plastic materials. So they get shipped out all across the country. They can be shipped via water, via trucks on our roads. So in transportation, unfortunately, they get released into our waterways and on the roads. So our Nodal Patrol is an initiative where we go out to shorelines in West New York, and we really try to find those nodals and see where are they heavily densely populated and densely located. And it's really awesome because hopefully one day we can have enough data to really see where they're coming from, and again, hold people responsible for the plastic that they are putting into our environment and our local waterways. Next, I want to talk about our solo sweeps, what I had mentioned before. But a solo sweep is really just a cleanup effort that is done on your own without the coordination of us, Buffalo Niagara Water Keeper. So you can go out on your own at any time, any day. You can pick any location and do a cleanup, which is why using the Clean Soul app is so important. You can go right on our cleanups page to find out more about our solo sweeps, but you will be able to make a pledge. So you can sign our solo sweep pledge, pledging that you will go out and do a cleanup in your own neighborhood this year and really contribute to our data collection efforts. And then the last way is to be involved in the Great Lakes cleanup. So our annual spring sweep is a part of the Great Lakes cleanup, which is a week-long trash removal effort created in partnership with 18 other groups and organizations around the Great Lakes Basin. So we are a part of that and really try to combine our efforts in total with other organizations and really try to ramp up those data collection efforts, which we have really done a great job with so far. So those are a couple of ways that you can continue to collect, count, and advocate with us. Emily, I don't know if you want to put the cleanups link in there now. But yeah, this is just more information about the Great Lakes cleanup. In total, there were, this is 2023 numbers. So in total, we the 18 organizations across the Great Lake Basin were able to collect over 8,000 cigarette butts, 4,000 food wrappers, 3,000 over 3,000 bottle caps, and same metal and plastic. So there's a ton of opportunity for you to get involved and really continue to collect data through this Great Lakes cleanup and our solo sweeps, and being a part of our annual spring sweep, which is coming up on April 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So if you haven't already signed up, we have over 30 sites across Western New York. So please join us on that day. Little plug here again. April 20th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can either scan this QR code here at the bottom. It'll send you directly to it. You can also email me. Yeah, just we look forward to have you a part of our annual spring sweep on the 20th. So we will stop the recording now and open it up for any questions that you may have for the last 15 minutes or so.
Great, thank you.